Being in the role of pastor would sure seem to require a good degree of extroversion, but often, just under half actually, of pastors are introverts. What does it mean to be an introvert? Well, the easiest definition is to say, where do you get your energy from? If you find yourself in a crowd of people and you feel drained, you're probably an introvert. If you find yourself in a crowd of people at a party and you feel just absolutely thrilled, you feel energized, then you're probably an extrovert. My wife's an extrovert, I'm an introvert. So sometimes we're out doing things in the evenings, we're with a lot of people, and we'll come home and I'm just drained, I just want to go to bed, I'm so tired, it's just sucked all the energy out of me. Not in a bad way, it's not a negative experience, just I've used myself up. For her, she's energized. She doesn't want to go to sleep. She's just clicking through, thinking about all the conversations and the things that were shared and said and just thinking about all that stuff. So we're wired very, very differently. This is just typically speaking. These are not universals. This does not apply to everyone. The 5 characteristics I'm going to give do not apply to everyone, but it's just generally the case, probably for the majority of introverted pastors. So what are the 5 signs, and what does this look like in ministry? The first sign is the do not disturb sign. If your pastor has a do not disturb sign on the door, it probably means they're an introvert. They often need extended periods of time in study, extended periods of time in quiet. I have known pastors who have spent over 30 hours a week on the lesson. That's a little extreme. Now, on one hand, this is a huge plus in that this person has studied, they're doing their due diligence, they're not just going out there and just winging it. On the other hand, if you're not careful, this can become a crutch where we do not really rely on the power of the Holy Spirit to make everything what it's supposed to be. We're trusting so much on our own competency and on our own ability to make things perfect, to make things known, to make things expected and understandable to us so that we do not feel uncomfortable going out in a room full of people and sharing our thoughts, because this is how introverts operate. The second is the introverted pastor may well struggle with visitation. You think about visiting people who visited the church, visiting hospitals, visiting the homes of people you haven't seen in a while. This takes the introverted pastor into an area of great unknown. And the introverted pastor, the introvert in general, tends to not like areas of unknown and incompetency, areas where they're not in control, which is true of all of us, but I think is especially true of the introvert. We just don't like surprises. And when you enter into other people's worlds, you are going to encounter uncomfortable surprises. I remember visiting someone one time when their son had passed away, and we came into the house. Son had passed away some time before, and the son is still in the room. This is hours and hours later, and just dead over in the bed in the corner. And we're like, "What? Tell us more about what's going on." And the mom was like, "Well, we're waiting on his father to arrive from Texas." We're like, How long is that going to be? I mean, that was very uncomfortable. I can think of, any pastor can tell you many, many uncomfortable stories. And not only that, but you also have to keep the conversation going at times and all that. That can be a drain for the introvert. It's not saying it's bad or that we're wrong. It's just saying it's a challenge. I remember Rick actually, who's one of the most experienced ministers I've ever known, talking about being absolutely nervous about some hospital visitation. And he's been doing this for decades, still sometimes uncomfortable. And he's an introverted pastor. Third is the introverted pastor is often very good at one-on-one situations, one-on-one counseling, one-on-one pastoral care, where they get to sit and they get to listen, hear what's going on, use their analytical abilities to assess things, and try to help. Often introverts are very good at being present and being very thoughtful, and that's a huge plus when it comes to one-on-one pastoral care. The fourth is that they're often extremely good teachers. All these hours of study, all this ability to sit quietly in a room without any disturbance and be in your absolute happy place often results in a very in-depth knowledge of the scriptures and of what theologians have had to say about the scriptures. Expert teacher in many instances, and often very reliable. The fifth is that you may notice that the introverted pastor doesn't really hang out with people from the church. They really may not have any friends in the church. I've seen it as extreme as 0 friends in a church, even instructed by an older minister to not have friends in the church. That's really extreme, I think very unhealthy. But you'll often see that with introverted pastors where there's just that relational disconnect. Now, you may be saying, I'm a little confused because I think my pastor's an extrovert. I see them on Sunday. They're energized. They're moving around. They have these engaging messages. Surely they're not an introvert. But yeah, they can absolutely still be an introvert. We can kind of fake it till we make it. We learn to do things in a way that they're supposed to be done, to follow the norms. but it's going to take on our part an inordinate amount of time to prepare to be an extrovert for a couple hours a week. Hence the need for quiet time in the office and the do not disturb sign. Hence the time for that nap on Sunday afternoon, because you're absolutely drained, not because you don't love people and not because you don't love shaking hands and hugging people and smiling and having a good time around people. We love people. It's just the fact that all of that is a cost of attention, of being attuned to people, being aware of what's going on. The noise that fills the room just sucks energy out. How do you help your introverted pastor? The first thing is invite them to something. It may not come natural for them to reach out and, invite people into their home or those kinds of things that are normal with pastoral people. So invite them to something. So many people assume, they're already doing so much. There's always so much going on. Probably lots of people are inviting them. Not always the case. There's often lots and lots of time where things are going on that the pastor has no idea about it, would like to be a part, but it's just never really invited because people assume that they already have things going on with other people. So just don't assume that, and just reach out and offer that invitation into something that they may not initiate on their own. The second is take them to lunch. Just sit down and get to know them. Have a conversation about family, about also just whatever comes natural. But again, they may not initiate that. They may need you to go and initiate that to get things rolling. But I can tell you that in both of these instances, inviting them to your get-together or inviting them to one-on-one with lunch, they really want that time. They want that connection. It may just be a little bit uncomfortable or awkward for some of them to reach out and initiate that. The third is it may be best to not call or text on Sunday afternoon or late on Sunday evening after a long day of just giving and being spent, not being energized, but just kind of being poured out. The introverted minister is going to need some downtime, some quiet time to kind of disengage, and is going to have to jump right back in it on Monday. And so if you can just wait till Monday to contact them or bring something up about what happened on Sunday, that's really kind of best. What are some things that you can do if you are an introverted pastor? The first thing I want you to hear me say is that none of these things are negative judgments upon your character. None of this makes you inherently good or bad. It's just a matter of awareness, understanding who we are, our proclivities and propensities, to be able to leverage our strengths and shore up our weaknesses by surrounding ourselves with people who have abilities that we lack. So the first item is, I'm not saying you're bad. The second item is be aware of yourself enough to know how to leverage these things for the best. The third is don't feel like your study time needs to be perfect. In fact, I would say that your study for a sermon is actually incomplete without interaction with the congregation during the week on some level. Sermons are actually made better by pastoral care, visitation that goes on through the week, where you're with your people and you're hearing the expressed concerns of their heart. And as you're preparing your sermon, you can take what you hear in the congregation and what you're hearing in the Word, and you can make everything connect. If you just hole up in your office and you don't spend time around people, your sermon, as complete as you think it's going to be because you analyzed it and you had quiet time to sit and study at length for many, many hours on end, and you think you finally nailed it, is actually incomplete without the pastoral element of being with people in relationship. People listen best when they know that you love them. As much as we want the perfect sermon, it's actually going to go better when we're connected than to preach the perfect, amazing sermon that's ever been preached disconnected from the body. People are just not going to listen to that. And you have no idea how to apply what you're finding in Scripture with the body if you're not in tune with the body. And if you're an introverted pastor and you're on the edge of burnout, then maybe it's time for sabbatical, maybe it's time to take a little breather or a break, maybe it's time to have some people fill in and give you just a little bit of time to breathe. Maybe it's time to form some relationships where you can get some support from some other people. It's going to take you stepping out into areas of uncomfortability. I mean, the extroverted pastor who may struggle to study has to sit down and study in order to preach, in order to teach. That's them sometimes stretching themselves into areas of uncomfortability. Well, the introverted pastor needs to step into areas of uncomfortability. It doesn't mean that will become your biggest strength. It just means it's an area of challenge that we need to address. So I hope all this has encouraged you. Maybe it's shed light upon your situation, your congregation, your pastor, even yourself if you are one. And I just hope and pray that this does good for the congregational life and for the connectedness of the body as we work on these things together and are patient with each other. So I appreciate you watching. Hit that like button if you found this helpful. If you haven't subscribed, I'd love for you to go ahead and do that, but I hope you're doing great, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.